Are old computer games as good as they were? Or do we have rose-tinted glasses on when we think about them? Here's my thoughts and what I used to do when I was a kid, going into the arcades, spending money, etc. Games in the early 80s were popular on home computers like the ZX Spectrum and games consoles such as the Atari 2600 because it was the only way to play the arcade games we loved putting the 10p into play. Games such as Kung Fu Master costing 10p a credit, whereas the Spectrum cassette version cost £7.95 and wasn't a game that you get value out of because after only 10 plays it would be placed at the bottom of the pile. That's not to say there weren't any good conversions, because there were. Commando, Bombjack and Athena are great examples. There were many other cheaper versions of popular arcade games such as Pac-Man, Centipede and Space Invaders. They managed this by naming their game slightly different to the one game they were based on. For example here, Invasion, based on Space Invaders. As well as the games based on the arcade machines, there were other original games such as School Days and Scrabble. These wouldn't work in the arcades then due to these games needing more of the buttons than the usual 2 or 3 that the machines used to have. One other thing to remember is the time it used to take to load the games from tape or cassette if they loaded correctly anyway. Quick games could take a minute, whereas some games could take 5 minutes, for example Outrun. Then you'd get to the first checkpoint and have to load the next part from tape. If you failed that section, you'd have to rewind the cassette and start loading the first part again. Some computers, for example the Commodore 64 or C64, had the option to add a floppy disk drive which used 5¼ discs. Not only were they faster at loading but less likely to fail if they were looked after. Multi-level games such as Outrun were much easier to play as they removed the need for stopping, restarting and rewinding the cassette tape as the levels loaded automatically. The Atari 2600 amongst other consoles are worth mentioning at this point because although they were cartridge based and extremely popular, I used to have one called Electronic, but the game's graphics were blocky and the sound was poor compared to computers such as the 64 with its SID chip. This is when the computer became more popular as you could write your own software on them. After these computers, consoles such as the Nintendo NES and the Sega Master System became popular. Not only were the graphics of games getting better, but they used cartridges which loaded instantly, a bit like this Atari 2600. The computers, ZX Spectrum for example, had cartridges but you needed to buy an add-on to use them and the games were expensive to buy, so not many were made, and cassettes were much cheaper to read and easier to produce. Here you can see the RAM Turbo, which is Spectrum joystick interface, is what I used to have. Now we have amazing games consoles such as the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro, while PCs have great graphics cards and peripherals such as steering wheels, pedals, gear sticks and the ability to display on 3 monitors, ideal for driving games as shown here. You can also use some of those on the Xbox One X or the PS4 Pro. Over the years there's been emulators that convert old games consoles and old computers to be played on Windows PCs and even homebrew ones for handheld devices such as Nintendo DS. There are ones now for the Android devices such as the Samsung Galaxy phones and TV boxes. Not only have old computers and games consoles been emulators, so have the old arcade machines in the form of a popular emulator called MAME, which stands for Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator. Now the old computers and consoles and emulators have lost some popularity because why would you want to the old poorer old computer version of an arcade game when you can play the original on your PC, phone, etc. So to summarise, here's my positives and negatives to using emulators and using the originals. Okay, so emulators, the positives are instant loading, cheaper than buying the original hardware, can be used on most mobile devices, not limited to being used in one place, and less physical space taken by using files on a computer or memory card than the cassette tapes, cartridges, etc. Here's my negatives. Game files are nearly all copyrighted and shouldn't be used unless you have prior permission beforehand. Setting up the emulator can be tricky to set up if you're a novice with PCs and Android devices. Positives using the originals are: nostalgia is a great feeling and using the original hardware confirms this and can make the game playing more enjoyable than using an emulator and reliving those old moments, of course. The negatives are that old hardware can be problematic, especially old cassettes and players, and repairing them could be tricky and costly. Having a few consoles and computers takes up a lot of physical space. Finding the games and then loading them can take ages. And most new TVs won't be able to connect the old consoles and computers without any extra additional hardware changes. So in answer to the original question, yes, I do think people are looking at past computers and game consoles with rose-tinted glasses, and one main advantage to the new consoles, as well as better graphics, sound and online play, the ability to save the game and resume at a later date can only confirm that the future is much better than the past, but yet again they release yet another compilation of old games for new consoles. Mega Drive hits anyone? Yet again. Again, thanks for watching. Please give me a thumbs up and a subscribe if you want to see any more of our videos as they get uploaded.